Hi guys, this is AJ. Welcome to episode 2 of the Have You Locked Your Door series. This is Chapel House. I'm a caretaker. The vast majority of my work is residential jobs in large homes. My job includes general handyman work and gardening. I've worked in at least 20 people's homes over the past 10 years. Occasionally homeowners will hire me as a security guard and to do restoration work on their home while they go on long trips. My most recent job was a 6-week stay in a 12-bedroom home. I was hired to do some restoration work on the client's home during my stay. A couple of jobs on my list included fixing creaky floorboards, fixing wallpaper that was coming off the walls in some rooms, and restoration of the garden. So pretty easy stuff. Upon my approach to the home, my first impression was that this house needed a lot more work than the guy on the phone had talked to me about. The short road that led from the front gates up to the front of the house was very neglected. There were weeds growing through cracks in the concrete, and it was crumbling away at the edges. When I got to the front of the house and parked my car, I noticed that all of the guttering was hanging off and full of weeds. A lot of the shingles on the roof were loose too. Most people really wouldn't notice this, but as maintenance work is my domain, it is the first thing I look at when I turn up to a new client's house. You wouldn't believe how many people have million-dollar mansions but don't bother hiring a caretaker to keep it in good condition. I was welcomed by the family who lived in the house. They seemed to be a pretty regular family, not unlike families I have worked with in the past. There were 4 generations living there. An elderly lady, her daughter and daughter's husband, their daughter and her husband, and their 2 children. I introduced myself to them, and the guy I spoke to on the phone asked me to go and discuss the work I would be doing while I was staying there. He took me out to the garden and showed me the picture of how it used to be and the standard of restoration he expected. I'm not kidding when I say that this garden looked like it hadn't had any work done for the past 15 years, judging by the picture he showed me. The picture was of a garden that was exceptionally well kept, a lawn that was precision cut, hedges that looked like they'd been chiseled to perfection, and not a weed in sight. The garden I was standing in looked like a wasteland that had been scattered with a ton of nettle seeds. The nettles were 5 foot in height at least, and there were that many that you couldn't even see the lawn. He took me on a tour of the home and told me stories about the history of the place. The house had been handed down through generations and was at least 100 years old. I spotted spiders' webs in every corner of every room and cracks in the ceiling. It looked like this house was dropping to bits, and all he really wanted me to do was patch it up. I knew that this was too much work for one person to do in 6 weeks, but I didn't want to turn down a job. He took me down to the basement to introduce me to somebody. As I walked down a dark, narrow set of concrete stairs, I expected to walk into a smoke-filled room to find his delinquent son slouched on a bed smoking a doobie surrounded by empty beer cans. But as I entered the room, I saw a tiny, frail old lady in a bed with several machines attached to her and a bell around her wrist. I started to get worried that this guy was going to tell me that caring for her was part of my job, but I got a huge relief when they told me that they'd hired a nurse to care for her while they were away. He said that it was his wife's mother and she had suffered a stroke some years ago and became bedridden. His wife couldn't bear to see her go in a care home, so they brought her home with them. I noticed that the basement had only one way in and out, which was the narrow concrete staircase I had come down, and there was a wood chip board screwed high up on the wall, which I am assuming was covering the only window. I didn't think too much of it, as the home was in such bad condition that he probably didn't have the skills to fix the window himself, so he covered it up or something. I introduced myself to the lady. I wasn't expecting a reply. "Hi, I'm Adam. I'll be taking care of this place while your family are away." But I heard a very faint, slurred, "Nice to meet you." The guy's wife came down the stairs, followed by a young lady wearing a blue uniform. She introduced us. It was a nurse who would be staying at the house to care for the old lady. The guy showed me to my room. It was a huge ensuite bedroom with a fireplace and a four-poster bed. There was a layer of dust on everything, but I settled in for the night, and the next day the family left. I decided to spend the first week getting to know the house and planning how I was going to restore the place. It was pretty boring with it being in the middle of nowhere. Me and the nurse spent a lot of time together. We would stay up late most nights, drinking and talking. The more I explored the house every day, the creepier it became. I would hear what sounded like footsteps behind me in the corridors, to look around and see nothing there. I would walk past mirrors and think I had seen someone walking behind me. Do you ever get the feeling like 50 people are staring at you, but there's nobody there? I felt like that most of the time, but in the living room in particular. It was a huge dark room with red carpets and dark brown walls and huge creepy portraits of people in dusty embossed frames on every wall. Me and the nurse hardly ever went into that room. The main staircase was weird too. The steps were made out of thick white marble, and there was a window looking out to the overgrown garden alongside the staircase that didn't even have any curtains. So as you were walking up the stairs in the middle of the night, you would always catch what looked like something standing in the garden out the corner of your eye, to look and see nothing there. There were a lot of rooms in the house that were locked that I wasn't allowed to go in. One of them had a sign on the door that read, "Peace Room." Whenever I walked past it, I would get a strange feeling that someone was listening on the other side of the door. I just put all of these weird feelings down to my mind playing tricks on me with the house being so old and creepy looking. After about 3 weeks of being at the house, me and the nurse had a little too much to drink one night and decided to take a bath together. We ran the huge roll-top bath in the master bathroom and we got in. We were both pretty wasted. We had been in the bath for about 5 minutes, and then I heard a noise coming from far away in the house. It sounded like a doorbell or something. We both sat in the bath listening to see if we could hear whatever it was. We were sat for about 30 seconds in silence, listening hard. All of a sudden, a bell was ringing violently outside the bathroom door. It was so loud I could hardly hear myself think. We both jumped out of the bath and grabbed towels to cover ourselves up. I knew that it wasn't a fire alarm, as I had tested the fire alarm days before and it sounded totally different to this. I didn't know what to do. Nobody else was supposed to be in the house apart from the old lady, but she was bedridden. Then I remembered seeing a bell tied around the old lady's wrist. There was no way she had climbed up 2 flights of stairs to the bathroom, and there was no way that it could be her ringing a bell that hard. And then all of a sudden, it just stopped. The nurse was shaking in the corner of the bathroom, covering herself up with her towel. I walked slowly to the door to check what was on the other side. I could hear someone breathing on the other side of the door. I called out to whoever it was. Hello? Is someone there? Hello? There was no reply. I was scared as hell to open that door, but I had to make it look to the nurse that I wasn't scared. I didn't only have myself and the nurse to protect, but the old lady in the basement too. After all, I wasn't only there for caretaking, I was there for security too. I put my hand on the doorknob. I hesitated for a moment. I quickly spun the handle and yanked the door open and saw a bell dropping out of thin air and land on the floor right in front of me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I quickly stuck my head out of the door to check the corridor. There was no one there. I listened for a few seconds to see if I could hear anyone running away. There was nothing. Just silence. The nurse ran and looked at the bell and said it was the one that the old lady had been wearing around her wrist. I tied my towel around my waist and ran along the corridor, down the stairs, through the kitchen, and down into the basement to check on the old lady. The door was wide open. I stood in the doorway for a moment. She was in her usual position, laid on her back with her arms by her side, but the covers were on the floor. I noticed that the bell was not around her wrist anymore. I heard someone running down the stairs behind me. I was getting ready to beat the fuck out of whoever this motherfucker was. As I heard the footsteps get to the bottom of the stairs, I curled my fist tight. I spun around quickly, and just before I smashed my right fist into their face, it was the nurse. I gave a sigh of relief. She was panicked and ran to the far side of the old lady's bed, looked at her face, and froze with a horrified expression. As I slowly approached the bed, I could hear a quiet growling noise like that of a dog. I leaned over her and I will never forget what I saw. Her eyes were rolled all the way back in her head and she had the most angry, demonic facial expression I have ever seen. "Are you okay?" I asked. There was no reply. It was fucking scary. She looked like she was about to jump out of that bed and gnaw my face off. I knew something was very wrong. I knew we had to go upstairs and call someone for help. Keeping an eye on the old lady, I started backing up towards the door, waving the nurse towards me. The old lady sat up in the bed and started screaming in a deep, angry, growly voice. "I will fucking kill you two cunts, you motherfuckers deserve to die!" Me and the nurse sprinted out of there, slamming the door behind us. We could still hear the old lady screaming. "I'm gonna fucking kill you two bastards, motherfuckers deserve to die!" I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the phone off the wall. I dialed 999.
999, what's your emergency?
"I'm a caretaker at Chapel House. I need help. Someone's in the house and the old lady downstairs is possessed or something." There was silence for a couple of seconds.
Have you taken anything tonight, sir?
"No, I'm not on fucking drugs. Will you just send someone, please?"
There's an officer on the way, sir.
I threw the phone back on the stand and me and the nurse ran upstairs to find our clothes. We shoved our clothes back on and the whole time still hearing screaming from the old lady. It sounded like it was getting closer to the bathroom.
I'm gonna fucking get you two guns. You motherfuckers. I'm gonna fucking get you.
I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it. The screaming was getting closer and closer. I was panicking, the nurse was shaking. I felt like I was in a fucking horror movie. This went on for at least 5 minutes, getting closer and closer. She was outside of the bathroom door, screaming constantly. She was ringing the bell harder and harder, and she started banging on the bathroom door. It felt like she was throwing herself against the door over and over again. Then all of a sudden, it just stopped. There was just eerie silence. There was no fucking way I was opening the door until the police came. About 20 seconds of silence went by before I heard the doorbell. I opened the door, and the old lady wasn't outside of the bathroom. I started to tiptoe along the corridor, down the stairs, the whole time looking everywhere in case she jumped out at me. The old lady was nowhere to be seen. I opened the door and there was 2 police officers. I told them what had happened and the nurse backed me up. They looked at us like we were making it up. Fuck, I would too if someone told me this. But then we took them down to the basement to show them the old lady. She was in bed, in her usual position, arms by her side, covers over her. It was as if we had imagined it. The nurse and I were cautioned for wasting police time. That night I called the family and told them what had happened and that I had to leave the house. They didn't even ask any questions. They sounded very laid back about it and told me they had another caretaker lined up already. So the next day, I left. The nurse needed the money, so she stayed. I packed my bags and got into my car. As I was driving away from the house, going over what had happened in my head and wondering whether I was fucking crazy, I could hear a metallic rattling coming from the glove compartment. I opened it, and the old lady's bell fell out. I panicked and threw that shit straight out of the window. I left that place, and I've never been back. I've never heard from the nurse since either. So guys, this was the story of Chapel House. If you liked it, then hit that notification bell to make sure that you don't miss an episode. If you're interested in submitting one of your own stories, then email me at ajsays@mail.com. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at AJsays to stay up to date with all of the latest crack on my channel. Make sure you lock your door, and I'll see you next time. Peace.